this is the OnePlus 6T, and this is the OnePlus 6. And I basically start every video like this, so yeah, I just realized that. But nonetheless, these two phones have been out for this one's been out less than 2 months, this has been out about less than 8 months. Both are very new, very fresh, but this is already outdated, and this is the newer version of it, which makes me wonder, is this one good? How do they stack up against each other, and what's actually different about them? So generally, when I compare two smartphones, I base them off on 5 categories. I face them off against each other, and the 5 categories are hardware, meaning the phone's actual hardware, inside and out, software, how the software works, performance, and audio and camera. So those 5 aspects are what I judge them on. But the problem with these two is they are so similar, there's no point in me comparing software because they're exactly the same thing. I can't compare camera too much because they're also exactly the same thing. And there's just no point in going into a lot of these things. So this is going to be a bit of a different one. I'm just going to go into quickly what I think about these two phones. So the OnePlus 6 came out in April of 2018, and I was really impressed by this phone because of how well it was. I mean, I didn't expect it to be this good, to be very honest with you guys. When I bought it, I wasn't that impressed by it. I was like, okay, another OnePlus. It's only been 6 months. Let's go for it again. But this one actually took me away because, one, I was kind of annoyed about the notch they implemented, but when I started using the phone, this notch was actually so well implemented that I kind of this is the one that I really enjoyed using a lot. This was the surprise Android phone of the year for me, for sure. I did not expect to enjoy using it as much as I did. And I went into it very critical about the phone, to be very honest with you guys. So to take me from a very harsh stance to a very me liking it and missing it now is a big thing. And I think that the OnePlus 6 proved that because it's such a good phone all around. Now the OnePlus 6T, in that matter, then should improve upon this, right? Yeah, I don't think so. So let's talk about it, why that's the case. Now, hardware-wise, there's only 3 changes on both of these phones. One, the biggest one, the one they advertise the most, that is the in-display fingerprint scanner on the OnePlus 6T. And the OnePlus 6 does not have that, it just has the physical one. So they both have fingerprint scanners, but this one is the more latest, the newest, the one that everybody's going to be talking about, the in-display one. They both do the same function, so you're not getting a new feature, you're just getting the same feature in a new package, if that makes sense to you guys. Second, display. So both of these phones come with notches, but one of them is significantly smaller than the other. So let me just show you guys. So if you guys can see, you probably can't that well from the video from this far back, but the 6T has a much smaller notch. It's a teardrop notch. This has a more conventional notch, but even this is really small comparing it to a lot of phones. And I didn't think that they could improve upon this, but they went ahead and did. And now the display just looks a lot better. Not to mention that the chin also got a little bit thinner, so smaller, thinner. I don't know which one it will be. And that really helps push the phone towards a actual full display experience. It looks like the entire front of the phone is just a display and there's nothing else on it. That's really cool looking. And they do it without making any major compromises like the hole punch display or stuff like that. Now, another difference here is that you do lose the headphone jack. So all of you people who've been a huge fan of the headphone jack, the 6T has gotten rid of it. OnePlus states it's because the in-display fingerprint scanner needed the space, but we all know what it is. They saw the first opportunity they could take. They bailed on the headphone jack like everybody else is doing, and now they're going to focus on wireless and their own USB Type-C earphones. Not that surprising, but as I always say, I just hate the hypocrisy. Moving on from the hardware, that besides those 3 changes, what you do have is the same exact software experience. They're both on Oxygen OS, both have the same version running. There is no difference. You get every single feature of this phone on this phone and vice versa. There is no real differentiation. The only differentiation in software is that in-display fingerprint scanner and how it works. Otherwise, everything else is the same. Moving on to performance, which is again a catch. It's just the same thing again and again. Both the same exact processor, same amount of RAM, same performance, no differentiation. So both, because they're only 6 months apart, how much different can it be, really, to be honest? The OnePlus 6 was an amazing performer. It blew everybody away, and the 6T continues doing that, but the 6T does not have any improvement over the 6. People might say it, but when you actually use the phone in real life, I absolutely cannot differentiate the two in terms of performance. There is nothing that I cannot do on this phone that I can on this, or there's no process that takes longer on this than it takes on this. They're both exactly the same when it comes to performance. So that leads us into talking about the camera. The camera is also very similar. So let me just show you a few sample images and talk about those, and then we can discuss further. Alright, starting off with the front camera. Let's look at these images, and to be honest, when we look at them, I don't see any differences. If you guys do, let me know, but that makes sense. Both of them have the same front camera and rear camera, so quality is going to be pretty much the same throughout. There are going to be a few differences here and there, and I will point those out as we move forward. Here's a low light selfie indoors. Again, OnePlus does a pretty good job when it comes to low light indoor selfies. I haven't seen too much of an issue. Looks pretty good. Noise is kept to the minimum on both phones, and if I wasn't an expert, I would just say that it's from the same phone, but of course we know that they're from the two different phones. Now in this image, we do start to notice a small difference in the tint of color. The 6T looks like it's just a pinch more greenish than the OnePlus 6, which looks a little bit more neutral. The 6T is otherwise has the same amount of detail as the 6, but I think that both photos, at a glance, they're almost identical, and there's honestly no winner here because both of them look equally good. Alright, so here's a photo that kind of surprised me. So this was taken right into direct sunlight, so upwards, and you can see the OnePlus 6 actually does a much better job of keeping a lot of the leaves in focus and not blown out like the 6T does. If you notice on the top right, you can just see that the leaves don't look like a huge glob of green. They actually look like leaves on the 6's photo, and the 6T is just not that appeasing. So I think the 6T is actually much better in this photo. I'm sorry, the OnePlus 6 is actually much better in this photo. So here we have another sample. This is outdoors. It was after a little bit of a quick shower outside, and it looks pretty good on both phones. The colors look very neutral. I would have preferred to have a little bit more punch. The colors did look a little bit more vibrant in real life. However, it's not a bad photo, and it looks pretty good in my opinion. Now this is the only situation where I found the 6T to have a little bit of an edge over the OnePlus 6. And you guys can notice that while this photo is taken in the same exact almost angle, they look like very different photos. The perspective just looks so different for some reason, and that has to do a lot with the focus. So you guys can see that on the 6T, towards the left, there's that little plastic bit. It is way more in focus in the 6T. You can actually tell details on it, whereas the 6, it's pretty blurred. The 6 just doesn't do a good job of keeping a lot of things in focus, whereas the 6T does a good job, and overall it just looks like the much better photo. The one thing I will note is that the 6T does look very grainy and noisy at the top of the image, whereas the 6 doesn't have that issue. However, I think that the overall image of the 6T is definitely the better one. Moving on to the final photo. So this is indoor low light. Once again, performance is almost identical. The one thing I did notice is the OnePlus 6 has somewhat of a reddish hue, a reddish tint, right up there near the where the computer screen is. Whereas on the 6T, you can't see that. It just looks very neutral. It's black. Whereas the 6 definitely looks reddish. So that is one thing. Otherwise, both of them have the same amount of focus. You know, everything looks pretty good, pretty crisp. The background could have a little bit more detail, but with this kind of camera setup, I really didn't expect much more. Overall, it's a pretty decent image for what it is. What's up, guys? This is the front camera video test of the OnePlus 6T on the right and the OnePlus 6 on the left. And I believe that the front camera remains the same on both of these phones, so I'm not expecting too much of a difference, and I don't see too much of a difference either. Both are on 1080p. Let me know what the audio sounds like on both, because that is the thing I'm more interested about than anything else. Alright guys, so this is the front camera test of the OnePlus 6T and the OnePlus 6. So OnePlus 6T is on the right, OnePlus 6 on the left, and both are at 1080p 60 FPS. Now both of them can do 4K 60 FPS, but because the rest of this video is going to be in 1080 60, I thought it would be best to kind of keep it at that level. And as I said, their cameras aren't very changed up, so I'm not expecting them to be very different from each other, but you know, you never know, so I am giving it a shot here. They look very, very similar on the display, so I can't tell. It's only in post that I'll be able to tell, but it looks like it's doing very well with exposure, and the overall quality looks very decent. It's audio, as I said, that I'm very more looking towards seeing what changes on. Alright guys, so this is the video camera test of the OnePlus 6T on the right and the OnePlus 6 on the left. Now both of these phones are locked into 1080 60 FPS. They do go up to 4K 60, but Since this rest of this video is going to be in 1080-60, I decided to keep it at that. Let me know what you guys think. This is the low light test. It's looking decent, nothing to brag about. There is a lot of noise, but you can generally make everything out, and it doesn't seem like it's extremely dark. Some things, it is taking a little bit longer to focus on things instead of not being the other way around, but overall I think it looks good. The main thing is, let me know what the audio sounds like again. So this is the 6T on the right and 6 on the left. Alright guys, so this is the front camera indoor video low light test of the OnePlus 6T on the right and OnePlus 6 on the left. That was a mouthful. And this is at 1080. This is the highest setting the front camera goes to. I think they both look really good, to be honest. The indoor low light front facing camera is very impressive on both of them. You can very clearly make out my face. There is noise, but honestly I expect it at this level from a front camera, and it is just so much more impressive than the iPhone and other front cameras I've seen. It just looks really good. Alright guys, so let me know what you guys think about this. So that was the camera test. Now camera wise, they're so similar that it's hard to say which one you would, there's no reason to pick one over the other just for the camera. So let's wrap it up and move into the final test, which is audio. So the audio is the speaker test. Let's listen to the speakers on both of these phones. And that concludes all 5 tests. Now, I mean, that's not the kind of traditional way I do it, but it was just a quick rundown because of how similar these phones are. And now, the conclusion, well, this is the tough part of the video, in my opinion, because how do you differentiate two phones that are this similar from the same brand, have the same design, and do 95% of the things the same way? You just can't. Now, when you look at it, it's hard for me to recommend one over the other because, one, the OnePlus 6 you can't buy new anymore. You can only buy the 6T. On the same hand, the 6T is now $30 more expensive than the OnePlus 6, and I don't think that extra $30 is justified. Yes, we get in-display fingerprint scanner, but it's not a new feature. You already had a fingerprint scanner. It's not like we are reinventing the wheel here. It's what I'm saying is that the OnePlus 6 is a great phone, and if you have it, or even if you have the OnePlus 5T, the 6T, it will not make any sense to you guys. The 6T is right now probably the fastest performing Android phone you can buy, and for people who are looking for that fastest performance, newest phone, brand new phone they want to buy, they don't want to go into the used market, this is probably the better buy, the 6T. So now personally, if it comes to me, between these two phones, the OnePlus 6T brand new or the OnePlus 6 used, if I were to buy it myself, one of these two, I would buy the 6 used. And let me explain to you why. It's got almost all the same features. The only one thing that it doesn't have is that newer display, which is a little bit smaller. Everything else it does exactly the same. And I feel like that big discount is worth it more than going up for that one fingerprint scanner. So the only reason I'd say you'd want to go for the 6T is if you don't want to deal with buying a used phone. You want the brand new one. You want to have everything. You want all the new access for everything. That might be worth it to you guys. That extra $100 or $150 may be worth it to you. Personally, I just buy the OnePlus 6 and call it a day. And if anybody asks me if they ask me for a recommendation, this is my recommendation to you guys. If you are looking between the 6 or 6T, the 6 is the better deal, even if you buy it used, because it is just the same phone as the 6T, with a few things missing. Not even a few things, one thing missing to be technical. And that's it. That's going to wrap it up for this one, guys. If you guys have the OnePlus 6 or 6T, do you think that the differences between the two are really justifiable now? Because I feel like there's almost, even if it is just a super cycle, the 6T is not meant for the 6T users. There's just no difference anymore where you might want to jump to the 6T because it's just, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. Let me know what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.